But yeah, I think that's it in terms of the 40k stuff that's been going on. Obviously, Auric War Clans, when it comes to Age of Sigmar, coming out real soon. I've pre-ordered basically the whole thing, everything that's new. I've pre-ordered, so I'll be getting my tower and my endless spells as well as the book.
So did you get your hobgoblin?
I also did buy the hobgoblin. I know it's mad. I did. I was like, well, in for a penny. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see. That book has been heavily leaked in its entirety. Like, it's been out there. It was out there before Christmas. And, various YouTubers have already done videos dissecting it already. My vibe on it at the moment, based on what, again, I would call rumors, but they're not really rumors in this particular instance, is that the book seems very underwhelming given where the army was at already. It has some interesting army of renown options, but ultimately it's not a very remarkable army. And Ironjaws were already in a weird spot. Cruelboys had some viable options. Ironjaws now feel like they are very much being pushed in the direction of Ardboys with a side of Ardboys. It really feels like that's where they want it to go. Which is fine. I mean, if that's what they want, that's what they want. But, for me, it's very interesting to see how it's going to work. But obviously we'll talk about it when we got the book, and we can do a little segment where I'll run through it. But, yeah. And again, I really respect and appreciate, the design team of Age of Sigmar and their ability to make things better. I think changes they brought around in the Age of Sigmar balanced data slate update thingy that they did actually have helped Ironjaws a fair bit, but not significantly enough. So yeah, I'll reserve judgment basically until I've seen the points and also how the regiments are formed, because that's really going to be the thing that really informs how the army works. What I hope to see is either a war chanter or a shaman getting the ability to take a war boss character, because at the moment there are only 2 lieutenant, sergeant, war boss characters that you have access to. One of them was FAQ'd into it recently, which is the Mega Boss on foot, and the other one was the Ardboy boss. But the problem is with both those is they can be taken as secondary command options for regiments, but the only unit, or the only 2 units that can have those in their regiments, are the Mega Boss on Maw Crusher and Gordrak. So basically, you have to take a Maw Crusher to basically gain access to the +2 movement buff, which you really need for the slow-moving army. But the Maw Crushers are, even at their low points costs, some of the most inefficient things in the army, which is also a problem because Maw Crushers shouldn't be as bad as they are. And from what I've seen of the new book, they're only getting worse. So it's like, great. Like, what a treat.
I can sort of understand the logic of they were the thing that literally every army had in the last edition completely. Yeah. So they wanted to change the sort of the build meta for the army in terms of what people are going to take in composition wise. So I can see why they've done that, but then maybe it sort of swung too far in the other way, which does often happen. Yeah, I mean, personally, I'm not a huge sort of fan of how the sort of the restrictions are around army building. That you've got to take certain units to unlock others, which sort of makes sense from a hero and troop perspective. But when certain hero characters are sort of locked behind other heroes, it sort of makes it a bit frustrating in terms of doing the builds that you want. And I guess you can lean into like the auxiliary build composition, but it almost feels like no one touches that and no one sort of dares do it, even though I think the penalties for it maybe aren't that bad, and maybe it's just a sort of mindset of the players to do it.
Yeah, well, giving your opponent any advantage, especially for one that's, I mean, literally the auxiliary system at the moment, I mean, that is a part of AOS that needs overhauling, because it is, for all intents and purposes, a completely functionless rule, because it doesn't come into effect. I've never had a situation where I've needed to use it, nor have I ever seen anyone use it, you know. But maybe
I sort of feel like the downside of it is you can just take a regiment of one, and it's only when you run out of regiments do you go into auxiliaries. So if they had changed it, so yeah, you can't have a hero on his own regiment, and he has to have at least one troop choice with him.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you take it as an auxiliary. Then it would make auxiliaries a bit more meaningful up front. But then, as you say, there's this inherent. I think is it the other player gets a CP at the start of the game. Yeah, so it is sort of minor, but at the same time, that is a big advantage to your player that you don't want to give them.
The CP economy in that game is such a big part of the game, and like, yeah, having that underdog advantage of an extra CP in Battle Round 1 is massive. Like, it unlocks so much potential. So yeah, I understand why it's not something you want to be giving away. But yeah, by all accounts, the Auric War Clans are going to be pretty underwhelming for the foreseeable, but hopefully GW are aware of this. I'm pretty confident they are, because I had the good fortune of speaking to members of the design team when we were last at Warhammer World, and they basically said as much. So yeah, look, hopefully at some point they figure out the way to make these guys less rubbish, but for the moment they are.
Just have to wait till the next balance update, whenever that happens in 4 to 6 months' time, whenever it is.
Absolutely.
I was going to say, did you also pre-order the Path to Glory book?
Yes, I did. Although I got to be honest, I think I'm probably going to cancel that pre-order, because I just don't actually understand why I'm never going to use it. I just sort of did it on reflex. And now I'm like,
I like the idea of it, but we've literally never played a Path to Glory game, so it feels a bit of a point. Like, I haven't purchased it. One, I sort of forgot to. I'm not going to buy it unless we were all committed to doing it.
Yeah. It's like
it's a great idea.
It's like the Crusade system. It's a hat on a hat. It feels like Path to Glory is maybe a little bit better realized as a rule set, but ultimately it's the same kind of problem that Crusade has. And as I say, I'm not that bothered by it. So yeah, I think I'll probably go in and get that gone, because from what I understand. Yeah, because from what I understand, it just layers in loads of extra complexity, and I think in terms of actual, I think it's got some interesting missions. Maybe that's probably the.
Yeah, I think there's sort of less admin around sort of the XP management, maybe, and what you're doing in a mission, and that's a bit more straightforward. But that's mostly going off of what I read from the last edition of Path to Glory rather than this edition. But it does feel like, you can customize and create and tailor your heroes more, which is one thing I really miss in both 40k and AOS. So that element sounds quite good, and it feels like you're doing that more around your heroes. And you are upgrading units, but it's not quite as prevalent, I think, in the same way that you're doing it in Crusade with your regular guys.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I understand that people like that sort of thing, and obviously for the people who like that sort of thing, that's the sort of thing people like. But for me, it's it never, the RPG element. It's very rare that I like fun games, and I like themed games, and I like asymmetric games, and I like settings. I like storytelling through gameplay is still something I find very compelling. However, I really don't play tabletop wargaming for role-playing. It's not really a functionality of the game that I particularly enjoy, because I think, there are rigidities and limitations of the kind of core concept of the product, the game, that, make the role-playing element a little bit more difficult. I always remember back when I would watch, say, like Tabletop Tactics, like role-play games where they would kind of add like stories to 40k, and they'd have like, basically all it ever ended up being was a lot of flavor text at the start, and then a few little kind of quips in the middle where they would refer to a character by name and whatever, and they would have an anecdote thrust upon them. But it didn't feel like they had much agency in that, other than that they were putting it somewhere to do a thing, and whether it did it or not was dependent on dice rolls. So it's almost, which is ultimately true of RPGs and tabletop RPGs and all that stuff, but it just feels oddly different in 40k and Warhammer. So I just, for me, it's like, you know what? I don't always need to play competitively, and I don't always need to play to win. Sometimes I like, more thematic fun games, but to me, like, the idea of a kind of consistent role-playing campaign through tabletop gaming, it just feels, it just doesn't compute for me as much as it probably does.
Fair. I would counter that and say it's not role play, it's storytelling.
Yeah,
Ultimately, they're kind of the same thing. It's like the same means to an end, maybe.
Yeah.
I feel like role play is a bit more front loaded with like complexity and like depth. Whereas to me, having a mission and a framework to tell a story with a couple of characters within your army, and it's their story or like hero's journey across a campaign, I think is really interesting because you can still do light touches. But I do get it when you get bogged down with sort of stats and every single unit has a different ability or several different abilities and stuff. Then it gets a bit too much. But like with all things, like even with Blood Bowl and More Time, it all starts off nice and easy. But then, 10 games deep, it's all a bit too much. But by that point, you should be wrapping it all up and then starting all over again once you've completed your campaign or whatever. So maybe that's the way to go through it. But, the few times we have done Crusade, I thoroughly enjoy the end of game sequence where I'm just rolling a bunch of dice and looking at something like the result of it on a table and going, cool, I've got +1 something or other. And writing that down on something, I really love that kind of aspect of it. It sort of harkens back to Warhammer Quest or actual roleplay games maybe, and that's fun little admin bits I don't mind doing because it's not part of the game itself; it's afterwards.
Yeah, and I do understand that, but conversely, it's the thing I like least. I don't like the administrative stuff. I kind of find it just very frustrating. But different strokes, my friend. Different strokes. So that's that. Iron Jaws are a thing, as are Cruel Boys. They've got big Warback, yay. Mm-hmm. Gloomspite coming around the corner with the Git Mob, the new kind of sun-worshipping Gloomspite, which is kind of mad, but whatever. Again, no idea what they're looking like. I imagine the book's probably going to start circulating amongst all the rumour mills and things fairly soon. But love the minis. And interested to see what happens with them. Again, I actually, intriguingly, off the back of seeing the Git Mob release, actually chose to sell my Gloomspite Gits because I just was like, you know what, I'm never going to get around to doing these, and I'm even less likely to do them if I have to paint all of those complex buggies and chariots and what have you. So I was like, no, you're all right. That can go away. So, I offloaded that to Joe over at the old Liam Dempsey channel. So he's now got possession of my, Gloomspites. Although I did keep the Regiment of Renown that is currently available with the Rabble Rouser, just because I like.
He was your fave. He
is my fave, but he's still my fave.
Plus, works with other armies that you own. So
yeah, indeed. So I'm interested to see how that goes. But otherwise AOS. I mean, it's an interesting time of AOS because we're now half a year in. We know that obviously a new GHB is round the corner. That's probably going to rear its head in in 5 or 6 months' time, and so it's really just going to be an interesting period of gaming with it. On that note, me and Phil and Sean and Rich are going to be getting together at the end of the month of Warhammer World and playing in a doubles. Have you added anything new to the army, Phil? Your 1,000 points of horses?
Nope. Mostly because everything went up in points, so I had to remove stuff from my list. I think I basically had to take out a whole unit of Hex Wraiths to make my army valid.
Amazing.
Yay. I've had weirdly little hobby time over the Christmas period. So I was thinking about stuff to add to it, not really for this event in particular, but just in general, because I still need to build them up to 2,000 points without having to borrow models off of our buddy Sam, which I'll do at some point, but I've not got around to it yet. So yeah, I'm just doing an all horses themed list. I toyed around with a few options and was just like, I'll just stick with that one.
Well, fair.
The prices were, they went up quite a bit, I think.
Well, you're partnered up with Sean, and obviously the two of you won a Best Painted award together when you played at Warhammer Fest in 2023. So odds are you might well get yourself a cabinet position at the very least.
I mean, maybe. He doesn't know what he's taking yet. So, because if he does Sean. His horse option as well for grave lords, not graveyards as I always like to say. You do. They would look very good on the tabletop because I think colour wise they match up and basing wise they do look quite good together. But yeah, I don't know what he's actually going to end up with. So I'll find out on the day probably.
Classic Sean.
Yeah.
Me and Richie are doing Skaven and Trogs, so that's going to be fun.
With new armies?
Both new armies. I've painted 20 clan rats. I've painted 2 out of 3 narwhals. I now just have to do...
Okay, Dan, sorry to interrupt, but why have you not just painted all 3 narwhals at the same time? Why have you not batch painted those?
I don't know. It's my way.
I'll just do one at a time.
Yeah, basically.
Slow and inefficient. I hope you're not doing the clan rats one at a time as well.
I was doing them 5 at a time.
Okay, that's manageable. That's fair.
Yeah,
Trying to do all 20 at once is my style, but it is a bit much.
Yeah, no, I've done them. They're done, so it's fine.
Nice.
You know, that's progress. Although I changed the list again yesterday because I really kind of reevaluated the necessity of taking the +2 the +2 movement buff on them because already they're movement 6. So do they need to be movement 8? It's really unnecessary. So
is that model giving them, or is that the new
that's the new
detachment thing?
Yeah, so it made me have to take a specific type of command choice, and it wasn't really gelling with me because I was I don't really want to take the Grey Seer. It doesn't make any sense in my list. So instead, I've taken out the Grey Seer, changed it out for a Warlock Engineer, and now I'm doing 2 regiments rather than 1. But it's what it is. So there you go. That's the vibe.
Yeah, because wasn't it if you had more drops than your opponent, you got the extra...
You get the extra bodyguard, well, not bodyguard, the extra general's regiment ability if you've got more drops. But obviously,
one of them could be the movement one.
It could be, yeah, absolutely. But, ultimately, me and Richie collectively will be a free drop army, which is still fine. Free drops is fine.
Yeah, I guess I haven't explained how the heroic regiment the bodyguard rule works with the doubles formats. Like, do you get your own bodyguard rule each, or is it one per army for? Because normally you select one to be your warlord, but they both count as generals, I think, in previous ones. So it'd be interesting to see how that works, because I'm sure we played it before where the bodyguard rules been intact, or was our last doubles?
No, last doubles was third edition. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Again, I'm sure they'll come around and tell us. I mean, usually because it's not a super duper try hard tournament type thing. It's more of a Throne of Skulls kind of.
I imagine Richie's already had an email, but he's not seen it and told us about it.
I imagine.
It's the sort of thing where 2 weeks out, or maybe in the next week, they'll email us.
Yeah, I'm sure they'll figure it out. They'll go, we got to clarify some things, and then we'll do so. But excited to play in that. I think that's going to be super fun. Skaven have been great. I've done a lot of play testing with them. Really love them. I think they're a very dramatic change in gameplay from the Ironjaws, so they've been really good and really excited to get those on the tabletop at Warhammer World and see how they perform. And I think Richie's Trug army will complement it really well. So he's, obviously...
He needs the +2 movement buff.
Well, exactly. And that was also the thing I was thinking. I think actually really it would probably make more sense going on his stuff and, Yeah. So, like, yeah, I think, because mine is very range based, and his is obviously very melee and durable. So we could definitely set up a lot of really interesting, play, where, he can essentially, get in people's way and I can blow them away. It's going to be great.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's nice.
Yeah. That's the vibe. And I reckon that's it, really, in terms of all the things that are going on. Obviously, there's a reveal around the corner. There's all sorts of exciting stuff happening in 25. This is all kind of new and early for us. So, yeah, and as I say, in my own world, I'm dealing with a lot of nonsense at the minute. So apologies that this isn't the heaviest episode that you will have gotten from us. For you watching us on YouTube, this is probably a nice little condensed little summary of things. But yeah, for us, Look Out Sir in 2025, we're committed to, the usual 2-weekly format. So you'll be getting full podcasts from us every couple of weeks, and we will, pending any random, events, be, continuing to put out these shorter video. I say shorter, this is still going to be near an hour, but yeah, we'll still put out these shorter video things. We would like to try and do a quiz at some point in the coming future, because we are aware that we missed the Christmas one. Again, that was all kind of wrapped up in everyone's general isms over the holiday period. It's been a bit of a troubling one for various reasons. So yeah, we basically just didn't find the time to get it done. Apologies to those of you who really enjoy those. I mean, obviously we really enjoy them. It feels really strange to have not been spending many hours in the run up to Christmas editing a quiz. And it's great for me as well, because I enjoy it, because I get the joy of receiving files from Phil, where he's crafted all of these beautiful segments with the scorekeeper and so on. So I got to miss out on that this year. So I'm excited to hopefully get to do that later on, but not so much later on that we may as well wait till the end of this year. But that's it, I think, with Look Out Sir, really, isn't it? I mean, we're just more of the same. Again, on the numbers and stuff, I mean, something of a milestone, although a relatively unimpressive one, I suppose, to some. We did achieve 1,000 subs on YouTube, which is really great. Exactly, a positive result of us doing video stuff, and maybe something that will continue in a kind of positive trajectory going forwards. Who knows? But yeah, as always, I suppose, really, I mean, yeah, I've said a lot of stuff. Phil, was there anything you wanted to say in regards to Look Out Sir at this point in time?
No, the general ramblings are, it's been a somewhat disorganised December, January, but we will land on our feet firmly, and we will, I think the next episode will be back to our normal sort of routine of a ridiculously long episode, probably, and punishing Dan to get it all edited in time, as always.
Always.
The whip will be cracked.
I deserve it. But no, that's it, guys. So yeah, hopefully you enjoyed that segment. If you have, why not let us know? All the usual social interaction things, comments, subscriptions, likes, all that stuff, why not, hey? But yeah, sincerely, thanks so much, everyone. We hope you have an amazing 2025. We're really optimistic about it. I think, this is going to be a good year for Warhammer, a good year for Look Out Sir, and a good year, hopefully, for all of us. So, thanks for checking us out. And, see you next time. Transitional noise.